Do you have someone in your life with a winter birthday and would like to make a meaningful gift or card for them? Welcome to Sunlit Brushstrokes. Today I'm going to show you how to draw and paint 3 simple birth flowers in watercolor pencil. A carnation for January, violets for February, and a daffodil for March. I've included timestamps so you can jump right to the flower of your choice. Let's go ahead and get started. So for supplies today, I've cut a number of small pieces of watercolor paper. These are Canson XL. And then for watercolor pencils, I have a range of pencils by Faber-Castell. I've got some different pinks and violets, and then I've got some nice purples as well as my deep indigo, or I should say my dark indigo. I use this one all the time. It's one of my favorites. And then I have a few greens. One is more of a springy green as well as some dark olive greens. And then I have a range of yellows going from a nice bright, cool yellow into some warm tones that I'm going to be using possibly for shading. I'm not 100% sure everything I'm going to be using yet, but I do have a range here. But use whatever watercolor pencils you have on hand in the colors of your choice. You're probably also going to want a drawing pencil and an eraser on hand. So for my carnation, I'm going to start out with my pink pencil, but you could absolutely draw this first with pencil and then erase the pencil lines, or mostly erase them and then But you could definitely draw this first with a pencil and then just lighten your pencil lines and kind of trace it with your watercolor pencil. I'm going to try jumping in with this. This is a little bit of a challenge, I will admit, to do this flower. So if you want to do it in pencil first, you can go ahead and do it. So I'm going to start with maybe my center about here. And from my center, I'm going to have some lines radiating out from it. And that's where I'm going to be drawing my petals. So I'm going to draw a few petals there. And then I'm going to have some maybe about here, kind of curving that way. And then for the petals, I'm going to have them kind of come up straight up the sides, but the top of it is going to be jagged because there's a lot of like ruffles and everything on carnations, right? So top is kind of jagged and then down. I'm going to go ahead and do some of these little ones at the front. They're going to turn on their side. They're facing us like this. That's why they looked a bit, they're going to look a bit squished, but it's just because they're kind of turned and you can't see their full length. I might even do another petal about here. Maybe we can see the side of it. And we'll do one here. And then I'm just going to come in and add a few more petals all kind of around the outside of this. You know what I might even do? I might even take some artistic license, throw in a little small petal right here, kind of on top of the other ones. And from there, I'm just kind of filling out these other petals to kind of get this flower to just be a smidgen bit bigger. And then I think I'm going to draw the base, and it will help me decide if I want more petals on here or not. So I'm going to draw the base kind of like this. So this is a nice wide base on a carnation, and I can already tell you I'll probably want a few more petals now that I see my base and the size of it. But I'm going to do a little bud as well. So I'm going to just come up here, and this is where I'm going to have my bud. Maybe I'll make the bud start a little bit lower. Let's do the bud about here. And it's going to have that nice wide base as well. And then at the top, it's kind of got these little openings. You can see these little leaves on the bud because it's smaller, right? Those leaves are kind of hidden by the ruffled flower up there. And you could even, if you want to, draw a little bit of a bud over here too. Do we want one over here? Let's do one here. This one is just going to be partly open. So I'm going to just do something like that. This one's going to be more open over here. And then our green leaves, they often come in sets, I think they always come in sets of 2 with a carnation, and they almost look like a blade of grass. They're kind of just a long, skinny thing, probably even more like a blade of grass than even what I've drawn it. So I'll put one here, and maybe one here. I don't know. Like I say, they kind of grow like groups of 2, so. And then let's go ahead and draw these little ruffles here. Let's finish doing this one too, so we know it's done. Just draw a few more petals, kind of just give it a little bit more bulk. Something like that. Yeah, something like that's good. And then I'm going to draw these in here. And this one, it's just going to be, you could imagine that it's like one petal like that and then kind of ruffled along the top, and then another one. They're just really close together. There's only going to be a few in here, maybe a few back here. Something like that. And then this one's going to be super tiny. It's just going to have a little bit of pink in there to make it look like it's just popping. Then I'm going to come and do some of these lines just to show the creases and folds in our flower. I'm going to come and add some shadow too, and that's going to help add more definition. I'm just going to make this a bit wider. There we go. So I'll just come through here with my pink and just kind of do this. Like I say, more creases and folds. So that's why it doesn't really matter that this is kind of sketchy and liney looking right now, because that's just going to turn into some more creases and some folds. All those creases and folds are kind of coming, like again, almost radiating from the center of the flower. I'm just going to kind of almost scribble them on here, and then I will be adding some shadows in a quick minute here too. For my shadows, I've got a slightly darker pink, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to push that right into the center, or closest to the center of all of these little petals. So where this petal is kind of closest to the center of the flower, it's going to be darker. So I'm just going to do that everywhere. And then it's also going to get darker wherever it's kind of behind another petal. So like here, these two petals are touching. This one's a little bit behind, so it's going to be darker along that edge. Just going to put some here, again, closest to the center. And then here you're going to see, this is kind of the same concept, closest to the center, but it's also behind the ones in front of it. So just kind of scribbling along here to create this shadow. And you can actually be pretty jagged if you want, because you do want to keep that jagged edge of the petal in front of it. Something like that. And then I'm going to put a little bit along this side. The left side is going to be my shaded side, so I'll put a little bit of shadow there, a little bit here, kind of separate these out a little bit. And maybe I'll put a little bit more shadow color on the left side of my flower as well, since that's my shaded side. Especially kind of as I come into the center here. Then I'm going to fill in the greens really quickly. I'm just going to fill all of this in with a nice bright springy green, and I'm going to come in on top with a darker green. So just fill this in just so I have a base color for my green. And you can see watercolor pencils are so forgiving. You can really almost like scribble color. You don't have to be always super precise because you're going to be layering more colors on top. And actually at the base of some of these, I'm going to define some more leaves on the base of these when I come in with my dark green. I'll try a little bit here with this light green, but I think the dark green will help define some of these leaves a little bit better. Now let's put another one here as well, since this one needs a little pair. Okay, and then I'm going to come in and do my green. It's going to be darker again on the left of each of these. That's where our shadow is. I always like to pretend my light, or almost always pretend that my light is coming from the right side. You can decide where you want your light to be coming from, but if you keep it consistent, it just makes it a lot easier when you go to shade. You can go, oh yeah, my light source is over there, so my shadows are over here. But definitely do what works for you. And you'll see I'm kind of doing the left side of these little shapes as well. And I'm using my dark green here to help define these center leaves, or I should say not center leaves, but the little leaves that are kind of at the base of these carnations. Now to blend, I've got my Simply Simon's brush here, which is a firmer brush. I like it for when I'm using watercolor pencils because it is firmer. It gives me more water control, which is what I'm after. I don't want to be sopping wet. And I also will keep my paper towel handy, and I'll dab my brush on that as I go as well. So I'm going to start in, you can just pick any petal, and we're going to do one petal at a time. We're going to work in the light areas first, and I'm kind of just shaking my brush around a little bit as I do this, kind of stroking it around a little bit. And then I'm going to come in the same direction that I drew these little creases and folds. I'm coming that way, whoops, to shade it, or to blend it rather. So I'm going to come over here and do the same thing. Light area first, work my way into the darks. And after you've done some dark shape, you want to wipe off your brush so that you, and maybe even wash it, so you don't drag your darks around, because you want to maintain your lights. So let's go over here and do the lights, work our way into the darks, and rinse our brush, come into the lights. Then, I'm a little bit wet, I'm going to jab off. Come into the darks. You can even use a little bit of a shaking motion. That'll help you still kind of define the petal in front. Okay, that one almost is over blended. Let's move along here. Light first, into my darks. do this one. We have to make sure we're not touching petals if we can help it. The odd one won't matter, but if we do all the petals at once, there's a good chance that we will make them totally blend together and we won't be able to see all that definition we created. So somewhere like this one where they're barely touching, these two here, you could probably get away with it. But when they're touching quite a lot, we want to just leave them be for the time. And once it dries, we'll come back in. So let's go over to this little bud here, do the light section, come into the darks. And I pushed quite hard with my pencil when I was doing my darker color for my shadows. If yours isn't looking as stark, you can always come a couple of options. I'm noticing this one, the color is sort of disappearing, so I'll show you on this one. Actually, it's almost too dry. I'll do it on one that's wet. Say this one that I've just done and it's wet. You can drop a little bit of your dark shadow color in while it's still wet, and it will kind of bleed around and give you a nice soft watercolor shadow look. So that's a really pretty way. You can push your shadows a little bit further, assuming you put them in while that little shape is still wet. Once it starts to dry, you'll want to just wait, let it fully dry, and then come in and throw some more shadows on, and I'll show you how to do that as well afterwards. So over here, I wonder if we can do this little, we maybe can. I don't think it was too wet. Let's see if we can do it and it doesn't bleed together. I think we're okay over there. Sometimes you'll know if your shape is too wet, you can't do shapes that are side by side, but I think we're okay there. And this one, just blend that really quickly. And then I'm going to come in here and do my greens. And my greens may mix into my pinks because I'm doing them one after another. And I like that. But if you don't like that, let your pinks fully dry before you come in and do your greens. So you'll see I'm still always following my general rule of lights first, dark second, as I blend my greens. I could even drop a bit more green in here, I think, because, again, the greens on a carnation are really quite deep and rich, aren't they? Drop a bit of that in there. And if you want to create a little bit of harmony in your painting, you can also grab your pink color and even throw some in your leaf. So let's just do that right here. You'll see, okay, that's quite a bit. I'm just going to blend that around a little bit. But that can be really quite pretty, and it just harmonizes everything. It makes it look more like watercolor. I like that look. Don't have to do it if you don't. I'm just going to come in and blend the rest of my greens. Now I'm getting a kind of a goofy shape here. If you don't like that look, you can always, if you have something like that happening, just soften it with water if it's still a little bit wet. Or even you can wait for it to fully dry and then do the same thing and just soften it. All right, I think these are probably dry enough. We can come back in here and finish them up the same way I did each petal before. Sometimes I'm coming in here just with a very, very light touch so that I don't blend things too much. In this case, these two shapes are touching, so I'm going to try and just leave a little bit of dry space between them. I can decide how I want to handle the dry space after. I kind of like a little bit of that light dry space when I'm doing watercolor, but if you don't, you can always come in and just use a watercolor pencil and kind of tweak it and get it the way you want it to look. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to let that dry and then I might come add a few more details. Let's just go wet this tiny little shape here and we'll call that good. Do a couple little leaves actually on this tiny bud. And maybe extend this stem just a smidge so it looks like it comes to the same level as our little bud down here. Yeah, I like that. Do you enjoy working in watercolor pencil? If so, I think you'll be interested in my free 2-part pencil technique mini workshop. Whether you're looking for ways to add texture to your work, or if you simply enjoy coloring and would like to add dimension to your coloring pages, this workshop is for you. You can even apply many of these techniques to graphite pencil or other dry media. I'll share examples of how I apply these techniques to inspire you with ideas for your own artwork. You can sign up for this workshop at the link in the description below. Now back to today's video. All right, we're on to an easier flower now. This is our violet. So for our violet, I'm going to go first with a yellow pencil. I've got to figure out which one I want to use here. And I'm going to draw maybe a few small little violets together here. So let's just see what color. I think I'm going to use the deeper yellow. And I'm going to make 4 little dots. This is the center of the violet. So I'm going to do maybe 3 of them, like 3 violets here. So I'll just do 4 dots for each of them. Then I'm going to grab my purple and draw my petals. And so with the petal, it's kind of like there's one long petal kind of at the front. I'm going to do this one. Actually, let's do this one first because it's going to be facing us. And it's going to be a little bit like this. It's going to come down almost like a swoop, and then it's going to be like a rounded kind of petal at the front. Something like that. And then at the top, we could do the top ones next. There are a couple smaller petals at the top. So I'm just going to do a couple small ones, and they kind of overlap. Ooh, I want them a little more round. That's okay. I can round them up. This is the beauty of watercolor pencil. We're going to be able to cover any little slops that we make. And then down here, there's going to be a petal on either side. So I'm going to just draw those, and they're pretty round, these petals here. I'm just doing a little bit of bumpiness to the edges as I draw those round petals, just so that it doesn't look completely contrived. We want to have a little bit of an organic look. So let's do this one. It's going to be the same idea, except that I'm slightly tipped here. I might kind of make this one a little bit curved, that like curled over on that front part. And then I'll do, oh, I'm slopping up again. Let's try this. Okay. Having a hard time on some of these. Okay, let's do this one overlapping behind here. And then we're going to have E-petal. We'll make it kind of come behind and behind here. I'm going to extend this a little bit more, make it just a smidgen bit bigger, this front petal. It's usually the bigger petal is the one on the front. And maybe with this one, I'm going to make it tipped a little bit. So I'm going to give myself some guidelines. I'm going to say the center is maybe here, and then the two top ones, this will be my, as you know, the center of my petals. You've seen how I kind of do that now. And then these will be the two side ones. This will just help me because it's a little more tricky when it's tipped like this. So I'm going to go and draw this one in the back. This one here, and the petals can be a little bit more oblong when they're tipped. And one here, and one here. So these ones are a little bit shorter because it's kind of tipped on its side, so we can't see the full face of the petal, or I should say of the whole flower. And then we'll come in and do some basic coloring. So I'm going to come in here with this same purple. I'm just going to fill them in. Actually, why don't we do the shadows first? Let me grab a kind of a deeper purple. I'm going to do a combination of purples in here as well. This is more of a bluey purple, but I think it's a pretty color. And I'm going to put a little bit of that where the petals are kind of behind, if you will, behind each other. So these ones are a little bit further back. Maybe put a little bit in the center of some of them too. And then I'll come back in with this other purple and fill it in. I'm kind of just doing pretty scribbly kind of coloring here, but I'm trying to also at the same time sort of move in the direction of these little petal creases and folds. They don't have to be perfect because we're going to be blending with water, and that's going to kind of cover things if things are not perfect. As you can tell, I've already had some imperfections happening here today. I'm going to put a little bit here. Again, these were the ones that are a little bit behind, and this one I'm making it behind here, so I'll put a little bit of darkness there. And then I'll just fill in the rest with this other purple. You can put it on top and it will blend nicely with the more blue purple that we have. So you can see either way works for laying down these purples. I'm going to put a little bit of this kind of this terracotta color on the edges of my little yellow centers because I feel like they are almost going to disappear on us, and this will help give them a little bit of like shadow. So I'll just come in and kind of do like a crescent or C shape on the far, kind of the left lower side. Now violets have unique kind of round velvety leaves, don't they? I'm just going to go ahead and draw a kind of center vein for them, and then I'm going to come around and kind of create this round bumpy leaf shape. So I'll do that in a few places. I wonder if I should consider putting a little bud up here. I'm not sure if I'm going to like this or not. Let's just see. Do something like this and just give it just a tiny, basically like the leaf is just poking out, and we'll just draw some little leaves to hold it on there. All right, I'll put a little bit of that blue color too. It needs a little bit of that. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and quickly color these in with this dark green. And then I'm going to come in and put a little bit of the blue and the purple probably in these leaves as well. I'm going to darken my vein before I lose it because I'm already starting to. Then I'm going to loosely, lightly color these in with this deep green, and then I'm going to come in at the edges and just put a little bit more of it, almost like as if we're creating a bit of a shadow. I will create more shadow colors as well with a bit of purple, but I just want to get a little bit of this in here, just in a few spots, maybe the lower areas. Okay, this one is kind of blocked. It's just going to be more dark because it's blocked by our flowers. But over here, I'm going to put my shadow more on the lower side. So kind of on the lower left section. So I'm almost saying the lower left of the leaf, but also the top section of the leaf. I'm considering it almost like its own shape. So it's going to have shadow on the left side and kind of on the lower side. I've said this before on this channel, but I almost always consistently, when I'm drawing from my imagination here, I will put the light source as if it's coming from my right and coming down this way, just to keep it consistent, and then I don't have to decide every time where I want to put it. To blend these, I'm going to come in first into my lighter purple areas, and I'm going to, again, stroke in the direction of my little pencil lines here to kind of blend them. And I might, yeah, let's do every second petal here, because some of these I think will lose too much detail if we do the ones that are touching each other. So doing the light sections first, working my way into the dark as usual, and I'll just kind of jump around same way I did with my carnation, and then I'll let things dry, and then I'll come back in and do the remaining shapes. Lightest first, darkest second. Yeah, this one I'm wondering if I can, yeah, you know what? If you leave a slight white space between your petals, you can get away with doing the petals that are beside each other. So if you want to do that in some places, you can. I'm just doing a really loose painting here, not too detailed. Yeah, so I'm getting away with doing shapes side by side by just kind of leaving that little bit of white space between. But if you don't like that little white space between, you could either come fill it up after it dries, or do every second one the same way, or every third one, whatever, the way we did the carnation, then come and do the remaining shapes after. So you have two options for blending. All right, now we can come in if we want to and start some of the leaves, and the leaves will at this stage blend into our purples, which I'm okay with, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to come in here and just wet my greens, and I'm going to drop some of my purples into my greens in a quick second here. I'm just going to wet that. Again, I tried to start with my lighter shapes first, then come into my darker shapes. Everything's kind of blended around though. You can barely tell one side was darker than the other. And I'm going to grab some of my purple and drop it down here, and I might even throw a little bit of indigo blue. That purple seems a little too bold. I like the colors mingling a little bit. Fix this shape here, I did something goofy. Okay, that's better. Okay, I'm going to drop a little bit more of my green. And some of my indigo. Indigo is just the go-to color for shadows for me. It's so pretty. And it just darkens things nice and fast. Okay, that's better. You don't have to do all that in each of your leaves if you don't want to, but I like the way that looked. So I'll probably do it again. I'm not sure if I actually like the green blending into the purple at the top, so I might just soak that out a little bit. You can always grab your paper towel and stop the bleed too by just kind of going like this. It'll probably lift some of your purple and you might have to come back in, but it will stop how much of that green is bleeding in there. Let's do this one. And I'm going to drop the indigo in once again. You know what I might do this time is drop a little bit of this other bluey purple color we used instead of our more pinky one. Ooh, that's very intense. Just guide it around a little bit. Okay, now you can definitely see the green is bleeding into my purple here. I don't think I minded on that one. What do you guys think? Is that a little too crazy? You can always soak some out if you're like, you know what, that's too much green. I do like a little bit of that color running in there, but definitely go with what you prefer. I'm going to probably let some of these back ones remain a little bit separated, so I might let this dry and then I'll come back in and finish those last back ones. Okay, so things have dried, so now I'm going to come and finish these little leaves. I just felt like things were just a bit, I don't know, I like the bleeding in some spots, but not everywhere. So I'm going to come and do this. I'm wondering if I want to add a little bit of this lighter green as well before I blend everything together. So on some of the lighter sections, I'm going to just throw a little bit of this. This is a little bit more of a limey green, but it's not going to look that way once I've blended everything. It's just going to add a little bit of warmth and variety to our leaves. And once again, I probably will still drop some purple into the leaves, but I'll do it on the opposite side of the light limey green. You can see how that's adding a little bit of life to it, can't you? If you don't like that, you can just leave that color out. I know violets do have deeper green leaves. Just going to drop a little tiny bit of this color into this one, just along the bottom. Get that water in there. Maybe throw a little bit more purple. Actually, I think I kind of like that. It almost gives the impression there's maybe more flowers back there, even though it is a leaf. And if you want a little bit more definition in your violets, you can always grab your pencils once again and just kind of throw, like if you want to, just a few little lines, kind of like so. Kind of in the center. You can use whichever purple you prefer. I've got the darker one, or the one that's more blue, but I might come in and throw a little bit of the warm one in there as well, the one that's a little more pinky looking. And I don't think I even wet the little yellow sections yet, did I? So I'm just going to quickly just very gently moisten them. Be careful as you do this that you don't have other colors blend into them, but what do you guys think? You could call it stop now. I'm kind of wondering, I'm like, I don't know, sometimes violets are really deep purple. They're not always deep purple, but I don't know, I think a lot of the ones I've seen are. So I'm going to take a little risk here. I'm going to push it. You guys decide what you want to do with yours. This is not necessary, just if you like a deeper purple. Intensify my pressure now and see what I think. You guys can be the judges of whether this works or not, or whether it was even necessary, because sometimes I do things that I don't need to do. I just kind of get carried away. I might even put a little bit of indigo blue into my shadows where I really want them to pop. We'll throw a little bit more water on there and see if this added or was too excessive. I'm going to try and keep that loose look because I really like how loose this one felt. I'm just kind of working loosely. I'm just kind of almost, I don't know, almost scribbling the color and the water on, and that's giving me this loose watercolor look, which you might like, you might not. You might like a tighter look, and maybe that's why you like watercolor pencils. I actually like the fact that I can get loose or tight with them, so I do a bit of both. That one's almost pushed a little too far, isn't it? So I'm just going to lift just a tiny bit of that indigo blue out of it, just a tiny bit. Also remember, it will dry a little bit lighter than it looks right now. There we have our little violets. All right, so for my daffodil, I think I might draw one kind of like here, and then maybe I'll do a bud over here. I'm going to keep it kind of simple. So I'm going to just start with drawing an oval. This is where my opening for my daffodil will be. And you know, it has that kind of like cone-shaped trumpet or whatever. So I'm going to draw that first. Now, if you want to make sure you're drawing it more or less straight, you can always put a little axis line through it just to kind of give yourself a little bit of guidance to make sure you're kind of more or less structured. You're going to do something like that cone. Then you're going to come in here and do a few petals. So I'm just going to do 3 to start with. I just want to space them more or less evenly. So I'm just trying to figure out where I want to put them. Maybe like, that looks a little off. Maybe like that. Let's try this. Let's try and turn these into petals and see what we think. We can always, if we don't like them, erase them. We're using a pencil and an eraser for a reason with these. It's because I'm a little less confident, I guess. All right, and then let's do one in between. And then there's going to be one here, but you're not going to be able to see it very well because it's going to be like running this way, right? If you could see through that cone, it would be kind of somewhere like that. But let's just go ahead and do these ones. Might put the center over a little bit. Something like that. I might even make that center cone just a little bit bigger. Feels like it needs to be bigger for the way I've done these petals. This one could actually be a little shorter if it's a little bit, you know, facing us. So that could also be a possibility. We could shorten them a little bit. I don't know, it might be okay tall. Having a hard time making decisions right now. Okay, let's go ahead and draw a stem. The stem is going to be something like that. And I might go ahead and put some little daffodil buds on here too. They kind of grow the same way. They kind of have this like kind of drooped over look to them. And then they kind of have like a top leaf, and then inside is kind of a little bit more of the yellow, I think. Then we'll draw some of these little leaves. They're kind of a little bit of a rounded leaf. That's a little sloppy there. We'll try this again. Something like that. Could make one of them kind of come behind here. And maybe one of them behind this one. I don't know, something like that. We'll do that for now. And what I'm going to do is get rid of all of my excess pencil lines because I have too many. You know what, I'm going to extend this a little bit, I think. Like that, yeah. And then yes, get rid of excess pencil for sure. It almost seems a shame when you're doing such soft, delicate colors like we're on Daffodil to have to do it in pencil first, but I think it would just makes it a little bit easier to be able to move things around if you can erase. I don't know, I feel like I draw with a little bit more freedom when I have an eraser as an option for me. So not that there's anything wrong with not giving yourself that freedom. I think it's a good experience, but I'm gonna, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna kind of draw in some of these shapes a little bit with my watercolor pencils, and then I probably will see if I can get rid of more of the pencil before I add water. So I'm gonna fill this in with that yellow, and then I'm gonna actually do some details around the opening of this little daffodil here using some other colors. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get that on there. And I might do this yellow down here. And then I'm kind of thinking, in my case, I actually really like the daffodils that have the yellow, or sorry, the white petals, but you can do the color you prefer. I think I'm gonna do a nice rich yellow in the middle and then have these just a lighter, softer color, but you can do what you want. I'm just gonna throw a little bit of yellow into here. This one's more closed, so you can't see as much of the yellow. And to define my whites, I'm gonna use this nice indigo, dark indigo color, and I'm gonna just lightly sketch the outside of these so that I haven't lost them. And then I'm gonna come in after, whoops, this one is the one that's in front. Anyways, and then I'm gonna come in after and remove extra pencil lines just so that I have very few pencil lines left for this light area. But you could definitely fill this in with yellow and it would look beautiful too. So I might do a few light creases with this indigo color, not very many. Maybe just to push these further back, petals further back by darkening a little bit where the edges meet. You don't have to do that. I'm just gonna throw a few little lines with that color, and then maybe even a little bit of this purple that we used on our violets. Then I'll throw in some of this green, and then after that, like I say, I'm gonna come over everything with my eraser and get rid of more of the pencil. Now doing that, of course, got rid of some of my watercolor pencil as well, but I'm okay with that. I just wanted to get rid of more of that pencil for such a light project. And I'm gonna maybe just, well, we'll wait and see. You know what? I might drop some of this in if I want it as I go and shade. I don't want to overdo at the beginning. So let's go ahead. I do want more yellow on this thing. So I'm gonna fill it in quickly with some more yellow. Maybe throw a little bit more yellow here. And then I'm gonna grab some of my deeper colors like this terracotta. And I'm gonna come around and do this little pattern, kind of like a little bit of these wobbly things around the outside of my daffodil. And I'm gonna put some shadow down here, and I'm gonna do that just with these linear kind of strokes like so, because I wanna create texture as I'm doing this. So I'm just doing this, a little bit of lines, and I'm gonna do the opposite. I'm gonna do the inside, the lines on the inside more at the top, where it's creating a shadow because it's kind of like a cup, right? And this part is blocking the light from hitting the inside. So it curls over, or maybe not curls, but just the whole way it's a cylinder. It's like shading the inside of a cylinder. If you want to understand more about shading cylinders, which is kind of what's happening with the center of this, you can watch my mug video. I have a series on how to draw and shade mugs, and that applies to so many things, including daffodil centers. I'm going to put a little bit of color right there, not too much. I might even put a tiny little bit of this brownish color in the shadows as well, just in a few spots. And then I'll come and just accentuate my yellow a bit more, make it nice and bright and intense. You know what, maybe a few little lines of this darker color in a few spots. Okay, now I'll come in with my green again and just darken everything because we want these to be nice and rich colored. We're going to use both greens for our leaves. And this I'm going to actually do mostly green. I'm going to cover that yellow up so that it actually looks like it's hasn't really quite popped yet. Do we want one more leaf here? I don't know. Hope I'm not making a bad decision. Sometimes I get carried away, as I said. And that's where the bad things happen, when I get carried away. There's such a thing as overdoing. Okay, let's go like this. I'm going to make some nice long strokes for the leaves now. Not super necessary because, as you know, everything kind of blends together. Sometimes I do like to still color in the direction of my artwork or the way that the lines are, of course, like I did with my carnation, right? We want to have that directional coloring, but there's other times I don't worry about that. Make that back one a bit darker. We can even throw a tad bit of indigo on these darkest parts of this. Again, I'm kind of making the shadow to be on the left, light source on the right. It's not too consistent on that stem there, but okay. You know what we could even do? We can take this brownish color, I don't know. Are we going to be happy with this? Put a little bit of brownish color at the base of these. I'm using the side of the pencil to just kind of lightly put this on, and then we'll just lightly moisten it when we go to shade, or to blend rather. I'm hoping I'm not going to regret that. And like I say, I'll probably do more with these petals when I go to actually add my water. So I'm just going to come in and do my yellows first. And I'm going to blend, of course, in the same direction that I originally did these lines so that I can maintain some of this texture that I created. And just call that good. You know what? I might drop a little bit more of this color into it. This is the terracotta. It's kind of orangey. It's a dull orange. Just drop a bit here. You could even use bright oranges. There's no reason you have to use dull colors. The bright orange might look really pretty there. And I'm going to let that part dry for a minute. And then I'm going to come in here and do this yellow here. Ooh, definitely we need some darker colors, I think, in there. I'm going to go ahead and do all the greens just because I want that yellow to dry in the center of my daffodil. I think it's probably dry enough I could come in and work on some of these petals. Let's just see how this goes. So I've got my indigo blue and my purple because that's a color I kind of want to be able to get into here a little bit. And I'm going to come and wet this petal here. You know what, actually, yeah, that's actually almost just perfect the way it is. I like that amount of blue and a little touch of purple I have in there. You know what I might do? Put a little bit of yellow at the base, just so that it looks like the yellow actually did leak into there. Oh, that looks pretty. I like that. And I might put just a teeny weeny little bit. Well, don't want too much of this color on here. Yeah, let's leave that one alone because I want to put it more on the ones that are kind of behind. So let's leave that one be. Let's go do this one. And yeah, it could have a little bit more shadow color. So let's just go a little bit here. A little bit of that purple, a little bit of the blue. This is kind of a little more advanced to throw extra colors like this in here, but it just makes it look so gorgeous, doesn't it? And it's really not tricky. It's really not. I say it's advanced. Even a beginner could throw colors like this into their work. There's nothing special about it that means beginners can't throw extra color in. Ooh, that's a lot of color, but that's really pretty. I kind of like it. I'm just going to lift it a bit because I want to be able to push the one behind it back a little bit. So I don't want this one to be too shaded. I really like that. Now I'm going to come in and do these ones that are remaining. I still have to come in and do the center, but that's okay. It'll be okay. Do that. I like that little bit of extra shadow back there because it's behind. Now this one is where I want to kind of push things behind. I wonder if I can do that or if I'll have to wait for it to dry. Let's see what it will allow us to do. It might be too wet. Yeah, it's bleeding in a little bit. Oh, just encourage it around a little bit on the back here. And then I'll just lift it a bit on this petal here. Just throw a little bit more water. Yeah, I'll just do it like that for now. I'll come in and if I want to fix anything there, define the edge a little bit more, I'll do that after. It does have that watercolor look though, doesn't it? Isn't that neat? I like the watercolor look that I can get with watercolor pencils. Especially when you're working on a light shape like this. I really like the lightness of the white petals. I don't know, I just really like playing with whites. And seeing how you can kind of throw color into them, you know what I mean? Might even change the shape of this one a little bit with some paint because I feel like it's, you know, something's bugging me about the shape of my daffodil now, but let's just see. I can tweak that petal a little bit. Let's go ahead and just moisten the center of this quickly. Yeah, I'm gonna put more dark in there, so just grab my terracotta color and drop it in. Might even throw a little bit of this brownish color too, just along the very edge like this. And just drag it downwards a little bit. I want it to blend. I feel like I'm getting a little bit tight here. First thing I wanted a loose effect. Getting a bit tight, but I think that's better. Yeah, and then let's just come in here and just moisten our dirt. You can even use a little bit of a dry brush effect if you want to. I don't want to make this dirt too defined. I'll just throw a little bit more on here. You could even use a second brown if you want to, or even a little bit. Let's see what happens if we throw a little bit of this indigo blue in here, if we like the look or not. Make it look like a little bit of the shadow that's harmonizing with the white in our daffodil. Might throw tiny bits of purple in a few spots. Again, this is optional. Just throwing a little bit of it in here to kind of harmonize it with the purple that I put in here. When you go to throw these extra colors in, you have to be really careful that you don't blend them around too much or you'll get mud. But let's just leave that be, and we can always assess it when it's dry. Now that this is dried, I can see it kind of went a little bit goofy here where I painted a little bit more wet, so it kind of bloomed. I'm gonna just put a little bit more yellow on top of that, as well as some of that terracotta, maybe even a tiny bit of the brown, and then just re-wet it just to kind of help keep the texture or get that texture back. I kind of like the texture there. Just wet it again, and you can see it's a pretty quick thing to just come in here and tweak a few things if you need to. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the petals. This one is the one that's kind of behind this front one, so I might go put a little bit of shadow here and then define this one again. Kind of lost that definition. And it's up to you. I mean, I might be getting a little bit too dark. The thing that works really beautifully actually with white petals is to have a nice dark background, but I'm not going to bother with that today. I'm just going to add a little bit more to this one too. It feels like it's kind of, like I say earlier, I kind of was a little too wet and blended things a little too much, so it's better. And then I'll come in and tweak these, just blend that around ever so slightly. If you've enjoyed working with watercolor pencils, you'll want to check out my watercolor pencil playlist, where you can find more videos like this one. In the meantime, I hope this tutorial has brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, that it will enhance all your winter birthday celebrations, and that it's inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye!